Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3, on top of page 1375. New paragraph. What we've learned so far, the last paragraph, has been a Bina Inyan, to explain this whole Inyan of Mishnah and Talmud, as Mishnah being the Kabbalah, Ish Ish receiving in an undiluted and in a smooth, seamless way from the time of from Sinai. Talmud being already the elaboration, the Koyach Atzmon, the Amoraim evaluating and deriving and understanding what the Mishnah is. We said that Mishnah is the Chochma law of the written Torah shines into the Chochma Tata of Torah Shabbat Peh, of the oral Torah, and in Talmud it doesn't radiate quite. Talmud is primarily in the world of Bria. So Bria Inyan, he began going back, let's talk about Torah in general. What is Torah? Torah is Torah's emes, pure truth, the truth of God. The truth, the core truth within everything is the Torah. This is the level of emes. This is the level of Chochma law, like he said. Chochma is associated with this emes because in Chochma, you have, in the words of the Maimer, the kernel, the core of truth, the core, the essence of everything, and its inner dimension. Interesting series of expressions. That's the Chochma within everything. Earlier in Ayin Beis and my other place talks about Chochma being shemen, that everything produces oil. Oil is like the essence of everything. Okay, and that's why the Zohar says, "B'Chochma is bariru." Dafka Chochma clarifies. Why? Everything that needs clarification, ein biru zeh ela b'Chochma dafka, because Chochma itself is a state of total clarity. Borer be'etzem. Al-Kain, that's why yesh be'keyach levarer kol ha'taruva is tevara. And that's the emes of Chochma. And as I discussed yesterday at length, it's the emes of godliness that radiates in that pure objective wisdom, but especially in the core, in the spark, before it starts going into more Havana Vasaga and the details of an understanding of it. So when you can access the Chochma, that's where you access that type of clarity. In other places, sometimes when it talks about Chochma, it says, Ezu Chochma Reyes HaNoiled. Chochma sees the birthing, the divine power that creates everything from anew. So Chochma is always used when it comes to that total clarity. Earlier in Ayin Beis, at length, he learned that Chochma is riyah, to see something, to visualize it. In other words, it's not just understanding, it's seeing it. Hisamtus, the idea of something that is resonating truths. So it's more than just wisdom. It's an absolute. It's a type of resonating truth, a higher truth, experiencing a higher truth. And I explained yesterday because Chochma is like the bridge between Keser, Chochma ma'ayin to matzah. So Chochma is that koyach ma. It's not quite tangible like a full-blown idea like in Bina. On the other hand, it's already something that you could hold on to. It's the spark of an idea. So it's a bridge between the superconscious and the conscious, or in the language that we sometimes use, between transcendence and immanence, the beginning of the spheres. Okay. But now comes the next step. The next step is this. So what about this world of Tevara? Chochma on its own, is Chochma Datzilis, is utter bittul and selflessness and godliness in the world of Chochma, in the world of Atzilus. But we said the whole point is birurim. What is Chochma being mevara? If everything was on the level of Chochma, there would be nothing to clarify. Everything is clear. It would be like when you're in Gan Eden, when you're in a higher spiritual state, or even as Gan Eden is in Bria, Yetzirah, but especially in the highest levels, what is there to clarify? Clarification is only possible where there's something that's not clear, where there's confusion, or where there's a mix, like he said, Taruv is Tevara, or the world of Lavan, where there's Ramoyas, like he said, the Yaakov Ish Tom Ve'emes, that wholesome man of truth. He was Mavarid, he clarified and essentially countered the Ramoyas, the conniving cunningness and lies and deception of Lavan. But you have to go into the world of Lavan. Like when we say, Vayetze Yaakov me Be'er Sheva vayelech Charona. In Be'er Sheva, the fountain of seven, that's like Atzilus, the seven midas of Atzilus. Is vayelech Charona, where he goes to Charein Afshal Mokim, God's wrath, where the divine is concealed. That's where there's bitter. So now he's going to explain, because now where Torah meets existence, basically. So the power to clarify comes from Chochma. And that's connected to Tiferes. Tiferes is already how it comes into structure, into the Kavim, like Kavayoshar. We talk about Sefer Bereshis, the Kavim Soy. Then it comes into the other four books of the Torah, which is the Kavim, as they are in Atzilus, like he explained, also unified, but it's already in a structure of mitzvahs, Yamin, Smail. So you're seeing that a pure truth coming from a very high state has to come down below. So he's now going to begin to explain the process of where Chochma is entering to create that clarity. So now he's going to speak about the Mokim HaMizbarer, not the Mavarer. Mavarer is the one that does the clarification, like the Chacham that comes to clarify a picture and separate and give us a picture, to clarify the situation. So now we continue the new paragraph on page 1375, pages that can be found at ayinbeis.com. Omnom, by contrast, in other words, what we just spoke about was the Mavarer. That Chochma is the Mavarer, is doing the clarification. What about Mokim HaMizbarer? Omnom Mokim HaMizbarer, the place where this bitter is happening, is in the next level. Hu Bina. That's happening in Bina. So Bina is now the next sphere after Chochma, and he's going to explain where the clarification is taking place. Essentially, the area where it takes place is with the power of Chochma, but it's taking place in Bina. So let's understand what that means. And I will say, just for the record, keep in mind, we say Chochma Bina, even though in Atzilus you have Chochma Bina, but in broader sense, remember, everything encompasses everything. So Chochma is mekanano be'atzilus. Atzilus in general associates more with Chochma. Bina mekanano b'kursaya. Bina nests in the world of the throne, kursaya kisei, which is the world of Bria. Zoh mides mekanano be'yitzira. Its primary place is in Yitzira. That's why the midas of Mishnah, Chagas of Atzilus, goes into Yitzira. And then Malchus is Mekanano Ba'asiyah. Okay. Just keep that in mind. It'll be relevant as we go along here. So let's continue now. Dehine Inyan Habirur. What does birur consist of? Hushiyi is Galus Emes. That in a situation where there's, let's say, Taruv is Teverah, you don't know what is the good part, what is the negative part. It's just like, I'm going to use a very simple business example. You want to buy a new business, or you want to invest in a business, and you start investigating, evaluating, research, due diligence, and you see, you know what? There's some positive things about this business and some negative things, but you're not sure which dominates. So somewhat in the beginning, it's not clear. So you need to clarify. That's what investigation is about. You investigate back and forth, and say, you know what? It's 80% really good and 20% is not so good. But you at least have clarified where the problem is. When you look at an issue in the beginning, before there's birur, lifnei ha-birur, you don't have that clarity. After the birur, you have clarity. I'm just using a simple example because in a world of pure MS, all that is unnecessary because there is no other. Everything is clear and true. What you see is what you get. But in a world where it's not that way, you need to be mavara. So he's explaining, what is birur? She is galus ha'emes, the revelation of what is true and what is not true. But more than that, ushiyah emes nida v'nigla, and this truth should be obvious and revealed. Gam loy b'mokem emes atzmei. Not just enough to find the truth, but also that it should be obvious, and where there is no, where also in a place that is outside of the world of pure truth. In other words, in a place of sheker, of deception or lies or confusion, even if it isn't pure sheker, but it's not clear. So gam loy b'mokam emes atzmei. That also outside of that. So it's one thing a person lives in their own true world, but it's also bringing that truth to a place that on its own you don't see that truth. So la gam loy b'mokam emes atzmei. By dezem is amesa emes, and through that confirms, or you can say affirms the truth. And the subject matter, or the item, or the entity that needed clarification has now been mizbarer, and you have that clarification. This is both an intellectual process. It's also in the process, for example, when you separate, what do you say, the dross from the what is it, dross? What's the other side of dross? From the sheaf, right? So when you're, for example, let's say peeling fruit or vegetables, you're also doing a birur. You're separating the peel from the fruit, and so on. Just to give an example, I heard the story from someone. This is connected to a brother-in-law, Alav Shalom, his mother. So when she was a young girl, she loved to read. And she read all kinds of books. Her father was a big chassid of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And Chaim Meir Lis was his name. And he was bothered somewhat because he saw his daughter is reading things, not always appropriate things, or not, at least not pure Kedusha. So he was in Yechidus by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he said, I think he mentioned it, asking for a bracha or whatever. I'm not sure all the details, whether she was there as well. But bottom line, at some point, the Frierdiker Rebbe had a conversation with her. And he asked her about her life, what things that she does. And she was a girl and living at home. And he asked her, do you help your mother at times? Yes. What do you help her with? Yep, sometimes cooking for Shabbos, a meal. He says, and what do you do when you cook, prepare for Shabbos, prepare a meal? He says, so what sometimes I do is I peel the vegetables. Frierdiker Rebbe asked more details. She says, yeah, peeling the vegetables to throw out the peels and derive and take out what that will be used for food. So afterwards, the Frierdiker Rebbe told her father, you don't have to worry about your daughter. In other words, it's all about getting that clarity. If you read something and you understand what to throw out the peels and take the message, one thing, it's when you don't understand that, where everything becomes one, where the means becomes the end, the peels become the fruit. And that's like everything in life, like technology. Technology could be a great blessing, but it could also be a great curse if you don't have clarity. It becomes an end in itself. It's a tool, an instrument. So really, life is all about the clarification of what is what. If you start worshiping the instruments, you don't worship the hammer and the nail. They're vehicles. They're means to another end. But this is all part of the process of birur. The same thing is in Kedusha. We live in a world, in a mundane world, and it's critical to separate and clarify what's what. What belongs at the head table, what belongs on your table, what doesn't belong to your table. What you should bring into your house, what you shouldn't bring into your house. What you should look at, what you shouldn't look at. What you should listen to, what you shouldn't listen to. But this is only because we live in a world that's lei b'mokam ha'emes, atzmei. In an ilam ha'emes, there is no confusion like that. Everything is clear. Everything is in its place. As I mentioned yesterday, chet eitzadas, one of the ways Chassidus explains what happened is they mixed tov and ra. Eitza tov and ra. The Eibishter said there's a tree. It's in Gan Eden. I'm not destroying the tree, and I'm not telling you to destroy the tree. Just know it's off limits. Don't eat from this tree. That's clarity. But Adam and Chava, whatever the intentions were, they experimented and they did eat. And once they ate, Teva and Ra got mixed together. And then it's hard to distinguish. That's why you find, I'll speak even on a psychological level. Sometimes one of the big challenges with abuse, when it comes from a person that's close to the person who they've abused, like a parent or a relative, it's much worse than a stranger, because love and abuse are all mixed together, and it gets very confusing for a child. Here, my father loves me one day, and the next day he hurts me. And it's hard to understand because you can't separate the two. It's one thing I know, there's an enemy. Like in war, one of the things that's so clear, the enemy is there and not here. I know who the enemy is. What happens if you don't know who the enemy is? When you have, let's say, the whole area of intelligence, you have spies, you have people who camouflage themselves, you have people who lie, they come behind enemy lines, then it's far more complicated because you know who's your friend and who's your ally. So just a clarification, the birur, knowing who's who, is a critical component in a world like ours. And in general, birurim, what is kosher, what's not kosher, what's mutter and what's asur, what's allowed, what's not allowed. So the Torah comes to tell us this is mutter, and this is asur b'derech etzenim in the words of Tanya. This is bound, this is off limits. It's fine, just you shouldn't act on it, you shouldn't consume it, you shouldn't, it's not your domain. So knowing where to go, where not to go, is all part of this birur. I remember once, more than once, the Rebbe explaining the pasuk in Dvarim. So the verse in the A says, the opposite. Behold, today I show you, and I provide you, I give you today the path of blessing and the path of the opposite of blessing. So the Rebbe asked the question, Neisen, when you say Neisen, it's a matana, it's a gift. Kol ha-neisen b'ayin yofer neisen. So what's the gift? The gift of blessing is understood. What kind of gift is it to know the opposite of blessing? How's that a gift? So the Rebbe explained beautifully that when you're traveling on a road and you don't know which way to get to your destination, and someone says to you, this is the road to go on, and this is the road you should not go on. To know where not to go is just as great blessing as to know where to go, because you could spend your time wasting time, getting hurt. So even if he didn't tell you where to go, if he told you where not to go, it's also a blessing. The blessing is not to go on the road. The blessing is not the curse. The blessing is what to avoid. Again, birur, clarification. Every GPS, every search, every research is really helping us find clarity. Just wanted to drive the point home to understand. Now, obviously, when we're talking about God's truth, is finding the truth of God in any given situation. Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's not obvious. That's why we ask questions. Should we support a certain cause? Is this the right thing? Is this the wrong thing? What should be our attitude? This is so much what I deal with, especially Sunday night. People want clarity. They want a clarification about a situation. So again, sometimes it's more obvious. Sometimes you need research. But basically, he's explaining what birur sheyi is. Galus ha'emes u'sheyi ha'emes nida v'nigla glam b'lei b'mokam emes atzmei. So even a place which was not the mokam ha'emes itself, you're also bringing the truth, and that ratifies. That's the word I was looking for before. It ratifies mesames ha'emes. Because if you say, for example, I know the truth, but I can't bring that truth to someone else because they live in a lie or a deceptive place, okay, it's at least someone knows the truth. But it's a whole other type of resonating truth and far more ratified truth if you can help somebody who was living confused or did not have clarity, and then you bring the emes, even a place where it was not emes on its own, where it was not loiba mokam emes atzmei, it makes the truth far stronger, because now it's ratified and it's confirmed even in an area that before was not. So it's like bringing light into a dark place. And the thing that needed clarification was clarified. That's why he say, "Ein simcha k'ataras hasreikas." There's no joy like resolving doubt. Doubt is the opposite of birur. It's Amalek. Suffolk and Amalek are the same gematria. because confusion and doubt is the opposite of clarity, and we know what it does to us. It's like a cancer. Doubts that linger create this situation where you are completely disempowered. What do? I don't know. Do I do this? Do I do this? So resolving doubt is essentially bringing birur in a mokim that needed birur, clarification. So, I mean, all this may be obvious, but spelling it out, I think, doesn't hurt. It helps us understand the real essence of what we're discussing, and also its relevance to our lives. Birur hazeh hu bebina. And this clarification, where is its so-called geographical location? Not physically geographical. Where is its so-called domain, its area? That's in Bina. Chochma, we're going to learn, does the birur. Chochma is the light that shines in. But the place of where it's happening is Bina. Because Bina, as we're going to discuss, I'm not sure how much he's going to say, but Bina is where the whole development of an idea, when we're brainstorming, we're trying to understand something and we don't have clarity yet, that's Bina. Bina is sitting and like learning a subject matter. In a way, you can say like Bina is like Talmud in this sense. We don't have the conclusion. We're trying to understand. So Bina is going to be arguments and counter arguments, and it's not clarity. That's where you want the birur of Chochma to enter into Bina and help us achieve clarity. And you could see sometimes a subject matter can be so confusing that it could take years, months, till you really start looking at all the details. I mean, every time you do research on something, you're always going to go through a state of confusion. You get all these details and data, and you don't know how to make heads or tails of it. Back and forth, it's all one big confusing mess. That's Bina. It's necessary process. And then there's the birur itself. So the birur hazeh hu bebina. This birur, this clarification is happening within Bina. Because remember, Chochma is the emes itself. That's, like he said, barur be'etzem. Bina is the place that is not barur be'etzem. So you need the birur in Bina. But we're going to elaborate. Let me stop here in case anybody wants more clarification.
Yeah, I need help. I
let me
understand.
If you don't want more birur and this birur, I'll stop now.
No, I just trying to understand how Chochma does it. I mean, Chochma.
I think you should have to wait and see.
Okay.
I just said Chochma is connected to the Ayin of Elokus, because Chochma brings bittul of godliness and brings that light, that clarity.
Mm-hmm.
It's connected to God. It's like someone who is accessing the bittul. But we're going to learn more detail. We'll see. Whatever's not learned, I'll explain. I'll try to explain.
So, I mean, Chochma does the actual picking out.
I gave a whole class yesterday about how Chochma does it. Why Chochma does the birur. I brought from Tanya Perek Lamed Hey, the Hagah, that you sense godliness, that Chochma is really, it's not wisdom. It's a higher truth.
So Chochma actually picks out among the Bina stuff.
I don't know if the word is picking out. Chochma shines a light. It shines a light of truth in a place where we may not have clarity. That's what a Chacham does. That's what a real Chacham is capable of. It's like just like you go to a wise person for what? For clarity. What does that Chacham do? He has a certain either more experience or a deeper connection, or, as I said, someone who's connected to the source. Then the day it's coming from God. The ultimate emes is godliness. You want the God's truth to enter into a world that's not so true. Like Yaakov and Lavan is a perfect example. Lavan was a liar. He was a deceiver. He was deceiving. He was cunning. He was shrewd, as I said yesterday. We spoke about. Any good lawyer who's able to derive the truth from a liar or expose their lie is essentially exercising the power of Chochma. Okay. V'zehu shebina nikra chosim emes. And that's why Bina is called the seal of truth. Chosim emes. Ukamoi upasachta Allah pisuche chesim. So this is a pasuk that is where is it by Yehuda? Yeah, trying to remember the exact translation of it. If someone can look it up,
it's from Shmos. Let's see.
Oh no. So Psuchi Chesem is by the big Dikun, by the
exactly. Yeah, it's by the big day of Aaron. You shall make a frontlet of pure gold, and here's Ubitachtal. I'm engrave on it the seal inscription. Kodesh la Hashem, Kodesh to Havaya.
Right. There we go. So Psuchi Chesem is yeah. She says Yedua Shekoy ala Bina, that this seal is referring to Bina. Shehi bechinas Psuchi Chesem. So how do they translate Psuchi Chesem? The exact two words Psuchi Chesem, the seal of the open seals.
Inscription Chosem. Let's
start Psuchi. How does Psuchi translate it?
Oh, you should make a frontlet of pure gold, and it says an engrave on it the seal inscription. You should engrave on it
the seal inscription.
The seal inscription. Yeah.
Okay. The Hainu Sirufe Esis Hamachshava. That's what you're doing. It's an inscription of a seal. So you're combining letters, the letters of thought is becoming the seal. So in other words, even though emes, Chochma is the level of emes, but the seal of emes is the Chochma that's radiating and therefore giving Bina that level of emes. That's the seal of truth. Like we say, the seal of God is truth. Like when someone seals something, the idea of a seal is like when the king had a seal. That was like that was a sign of like a signature. So what is the signature of God? It's not just a symbol. It's emes. That's the seal of God. That's the signature of God. Sometimes the word signature is like seal, signature, like the signature item or the signature feature. Basically, the signature feature and seal of God is truth.
What is this?
When you make an inscription, a seal, it's not just a dot. It's like you could have letters in it, you could have images in it. So he's saying that the level of Bina is not just Nekudas HaChochma, it's like a seal in the sense there's an inscription here. So it has details. So it's taking together the thought, the letters of thought, and putting it into like into a seal. That's what he's saying is what Bina is. Like he said, the Chochma, it continues. The Chochma hi emes. Chochma is the level of truth itself. Ubina hi chesem emes. Bina is the seal of truth. What does that mean? Like he said, the Hainu Sheba Bina misames ha'emes the Chochma. In Bina, it ratifies, it confirms and affirms the truth of Chochma. That's why it's called chesem emes, not just emes. So Chochma would be the actual true point. Bina would be, let's say, the discussion, and then when you bring in when you come to that and you come to the clarity and the truth, it ratifies the emes of Chochma. So it's like the conclusion of Bina confirms the truth that Chochma which originated in Chochma. It's just like, for example, let's say one of the sages or a Talmid Chacham or the teacher teaches an idea. And then the students sit down to discuss the idea. And they go back and forth to try to understand, evaluate, dissect the teacher's teaching. And then after a long discussion and arguments and counter-arguments, they come away and say, now we understand the emes of our teacher. That's the process, how Bina becomes the seal of truth. It seals it and gives it that affirmation that after review And after evaluation, it confirms the truth that we heard in the first place. But before, we didn't understand it all. Now we went through the whole processing, and it confirms and ratifies that truth. That's essentially what he's saying here.
He still didn't explain, and he didn't explain about
Inyan,
how is it connected to Kohen Gadol? But okay.
he's not discussing. He said, "Kamash kaseh b'makom acher." So you have to go look elsewhere. He's not going to detail. It's not relevant here to Kohen Gadol. The relevance here is the concept that Bina is chesed emes. I'm sure Makom Acher does discuss it. You have to look up the Maimorim about Pesuchei Chesim if you really want to know. But Inyan who, and here's the Inyan. Hine anakuda the Chochma she emes. The Chochma, the Kuda of Chochma on its own, which is truth, pure truth, like he said before, birur, borur be'etzem. However, eina emes nigla b'musik. That truth is within the kernel and the core of Chochma. It's not been revealed and understood. Just like it's a revelation, like the Eibishter says something. And it's emes lamite, absolute truth, but it's eina nigla musik yet. What does that mean? Who? Even though the inyan itself is clear on its own, that inyan, he says in Yiddish, that inyan is klor. In Yiddish is the expression klor, which really means clarity. Clear, crystal clear. Klor, that inyan, the inyan is klor, like it is the truth of something. So in the world of truth, in the world of Chochma, it's borer ma'atzmei. It's very clear. However, so it's only clear within. It's like, let's say you have a witness who actually witnessed something that happened. He knows what happened, but he didn't bear testimony yet. Then you bring the witness to the stand, and he bears testimony and says, here's what I heard, or here's what I saw. So in other words, you can have a truth, but it's not yet clear and revealed to others or to the world around you. So Chochma, he says, is clear, but it's not nigla musik. The inyan within itself is true. Again, it's like you have confusion in your life or some question. You come to someone for advice, someone wise. So they may have the answer, but until they don't tell it to you, it's all within themselves. It's not yet become apparent and expressed. In the inyan itself, in other words, there is a truth there that it's so and so. And now he's adding something more. But this truth, that this is actually the truth, is not revealed and eina muchrich, meaning you haven't yet made a case for it. It may be true, but you haven't proven it. Just like you have in a court case where the attorney will get up and say, I am going to prove so and so and so. But then he has to build a case around it. In other words, just to say the truth doesn't mean that you've convinced anyone or you have proof for it. You need to then build up the case. Only the Chacham himself, the wise person himself, who conceived of this wisdom, he's a true wise person. He sees the truth. He's very clear. He sees it. And he also sees the compelling case that that's how it is. That it must say that. But to another person that's not wise like him, that truth is not revealed. So you can have someone who's very clear. You sometimes sometimes in the discussion, someone says, I'm clear, crystal clear to me what the situation is. Someone else will say, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. So basically, in other words, is the emes can be in a place, but it's not yet been brought to areas that are not yet on that level of wisdom, like he's saying here. Okay. The ancient but to another who's not wise like him, like this Chochma Amiti, this truth is not yet revealed, is not revealed. So then how does it get revealed? So what do? So he says, here comes the process. The Bina. The truth gets revealed through the immersion and the iyun, the engrossing yourself and immersing yourself. And iyun means in depth. In other words, investing yourself and analyzing it in depth of Bina. So even though, like I said before, someone may have a very clear picture, but for someone who doesn't, only way is through an iyun of Bina. Go research it. You know, again, going back to the example I said before, you could have a business that can be an excellent business, and you present it, you make a good presentation, but the people who you're looking for their investment or to buy the company, they may say, we're not sure. And so you know what? Go look into it. That's called due diligence. It's called research. It's called evaluation, interview, investigation. You investigate until you come to say, yeah, you're right. The truth that you had offered is correct. Or they come to a different conclusion. Here, obviously, we want to come to that emes. So that's the iyun of Bina. The kasher ya'ayin b'sichle. When you immerse yourself, you engross yourself with your mind, with his mind. Ba'avonas, by understanding vasogas and comprehending ha'inyan, the inyan l'havinoi heitev, to understand it well, b'sichle, in his mind. Oz yizgala emes, then the truth gets revealed. Shalanakudas haskola, the truth of the Nakudas haskola of Chochma that was there in the Nakuda gets revealed, and not just revealed, the Eich shemuchacha inyan kach, and also how the compelling case that you have to say that this is the conclusion. You have to say this is the truth. Up to that point, you're in doubt and not sure. And furthermore, what does Bina also do? Begam, through Bina, through the exploration and evaluation, and everything that Bina does in trying to understand something well, the inyan gets crystallized and clarified. Mikol sig upselis, from every speck and every any pselis is waste. It's like when let's say I mentioned before, peeling vegetables, or picking out the waste in lettuce or whatever it may be in a salad. So sig pselis are the things that you throw out, the pits, or other dross or other waste that is not part of it. That's called bitter. That's actually an halacha. That's what bitter is. Bitter, you take a piece of food and you're not on Shabbos, for example, you're not supposed to be doing that. So bitter from all singing. And seichel is also the same idea. When you have a comprehensive idea, like when, let's say, you're writing a book, or you're writing a thesis, or you're writing an article. So you may go back and forth different arguments, and then you start editing out the excess, things that are either not necessary or things that are actually wrong. But that can only come with the process of Bina, because you don't have that clarity in the beginning. The Chochma may have it, but Bina is the process of, like he said, first of all, getting an understanding and compelling case of the truth. But now he's also saying you're clarifying it from all the waste and sig and pselis. The exact translation of sig, I think, is like particles, or not particles. The word sig is sigim. I'm not exact translation pselis, but same idea.
Maybe sig is a partial extra thing. Pselis is completely waste.
Right. A sig is like in silver or gold. When you want to purify it, you remove some of the metal or the coal.
The modern Hebrew is translating it as dross. Exactly what you're saying it is.
Okay, good. So then good. I just was wondering if there's another word. It's fine. It's good. And what does that mean in Seichel? Mikol Toz B'Sheker. You're clarifying it from every mistake and anything that's wrong. Sheyochel Lipel B'Zeh. That may fall into the picture. Like you see, again, Bina, you're bringing ideas from many directions. And then when you start clarifying, you start saying, you know what? Okay, this is a good point you made. But this point was not so clear. Or this is a mistake. Or it's wrong. Sheker. False. So anything that may fall into the picture, you want to eliminate. And this is all what Bina does. This clarification is all being done in the world of Bina. Because the Nekuda of Chochma is going back again to Chochma. That spark, the kernel and core of Chochma, being it's only a Nekuda, it's only a point. It's like a concentrated idea. You had an idea. It resonates as true, but it's only a Nekuda. That Nekuda can be guided and inclined to every direction. Look, you see very often, someone comes up with a brilliant idea. Then you sit down and start brainstorming about the idea, and the idea can go in so many directions. Someone says, that idea, we can do this, let's develop it this way. Someone else comes up with another way of developing it. You know, just to give you an example, I heard when Rav Zevin, he was the great scholar and also the first editor of Encyclopedia Talmudis. It's a Talmudic encyclopedia. The Rebbe was a very big support of it. And they're still not finished, but it continues on. So his methodology was very interesting. So what they say, they did it by subject matter. Say Erech Chanukah or Erech Chetzi Shir or whatever it may be. Erech Tara, we go earlier. So it's a subject matter that needs to now distill everything in the written Torah and the oral Torah and the Rishenim, Achreinim, Poskim, to come away with a summary. So obviously, there's a certain point, everyone knows what Shabbos has certain dinim, Chanukah, so on. But he gave one erech to, I believe, 4 or 5 different editors and said, each of you develop it differently, develop it the best you can. And the rule was they couldn't communicate with each other because he wanted them each to do the best research they can, basically the Bina part. And then he would take all the 5 versions, these are all scholars, obviously, and he would edit it and get the best final product. And sometimes he'd mix from one to the next. Each one had their strengths and weaknesses. Some may have mistakes, maybe, like looking at another. My point is that you could take an Nekuda and it could be developed in many different ways. Because it's only an Nekuda. It's only a kernel. It carries a truth to it. And you want to make sure that whatever way it's developed is aligned with the integrity of the kernel of truth. But basically, Nekuda alone, Yechil Na'tesed L'chol Tzad. So Hagam Sha'Nekuda, he butter be'etzem, and though this spark or this essential core is clear, fundamentally clear, like we said before, the butter be'etzem inyan canal, it's clear the etzem inyan, the core idea is clear. It's clear only by someone who can receive the nekuda who's on that level. And to perceive and know and recognize this point of truth. But someone who's not a container for that, and he only receives the outer dimension of the nekuda, basically the point, but not necessarily the inner resonating truth of it, he actually can come and make a mistake, and actually something that is sheker, that's false, and come to a false conclusion. So in other words, hearing a nekuda is not a guarantee, even though the emes of the nekuda is there, it's not a guarantee that everyone who listens to it or receives it is going to get it. There will be people who can get it, there are people that may not get it. Yeah, I see this is quite a long...
Because it's a nekuda. You know...
Correct. Exactly. So in other words, you haven't ratified it yet. When you go through the process of Bina, and even though Bina on its own is not clear, you come to conclude, then you could say, we went through all the details and I've come to the conclusion. Like I said, one person can say, I'm convinced that this is the truth. But I tell that to you and you'll say, you know what? I'm not convinced. And it's your right. You don't have to accept my conclusion. So I'll say to you, go research it, evaluate, ask questions. You ever see someone says, explore. On the contrary, challenge me and do whatever it takes to get through all the details. And then you could say, I went through it all. And yes, I've come to the same conclusion. But that's the end of the process. So bottom line is that the Nakuda can be there, but it's not yet extended and expressed itself, like he said before, in a revealed way, in a necessary way. And also there can be still mistakes and sigim and pselis for the reason because you haven't really come to that, arrived at that place yet. I'm going to stop here because I see the topic is going for, let's see here, a good shtickle here, till the end of the next paragraph on the next page. But it's, what can I say? It's a really beautiful piece. The Rebbe Rashab is, relatively speaking, quite elaborating here. He's not writing this b'kitzur and really giving us a very powerful way of understanding the process of how one comes from a point of lack of clarity to clarity. And it's not just that, like some say, I know it and that's it. No, we want to actually extend the emes of Chochma into Bina. Just like we want to extend the emes of godliness into a world that doesn't yet have that revelation. So it's also a very good way of prospecting the process. That person who's not there yet, you cannot just force it on them. You can't just say, hey, I know this is the truth and that's that. There has to be a process of Bina that helps people arrive at that place. And they have to work on it, and there's no shortcuts. So obviously, you could talk about that there are people who have a gilia, an epiphany, a gilia of emes from above. But in most cases, you want to also have it from below, which means you work on it and you come through a iyun and a pilpul and a discussion. So all this is going to really come back to help us understand the process of learning Torah, Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, and everything. So this is really as I said, tremendous piece that is ultimately going to help us understand that through Torah. Yeah, ultimately the interface between transcendence and existence, between godliness, the emes of Chochma, Torah, all the way into the world of existence.
Can you take a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm stopping here right before the parentheses, Ayin Lamailo, and go ahead.
Yeah, I might have asked you once the recording ended, but I think what you might have to say might be useful, really, for everybody. In terms of Chassidus applied, practical application of this, and I'm switching gears here, but I don't think I'm too far off from the question. So, used to be, I'm talking about modern human interactions, modern human interrelations. Used to be that when you went through this process of birur, let's say in a logical proof, you could persuade someone, a reasonably intelligent, reasonably objective person, you could persuade them of the truth of your position through stating it and using logic and taking their position or whatever, another position, and showing where the waste is, where there's errors and mistakes, and come to some clarification of what's true. That used to be the process of proving things. It ideally still is the process, like the Rebbe Rashab says right here. This is how you prove truth. Mamish, this is exactly how he's explaining how you establish truth. You can't just say, here's the truth. You have to sort through it all and explain the other perspective, and here's what's wrong with the other perspective, and this is why this point is true. Why is it in our current society, I'm asking your opinion here, that this process doesn't seem to work that well anymore? What is it about what's going on in the world right now that this very clear, obvious process of sorting through what's true and what's not? You can talk to someone who's reasonably smart and reasonably intelligent, disagrees with your perspective of reality, and you can go through this whole process. And let's just say you're right. You happen to be right. We're not talking about a political opinion. We're talking about a fact in reality. And yet the other person can say, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't resonate with me at all. I still think the sky is purple. You know, I don't understand. Like, why doesn't this work anymore?
This is already a commentary on the way people's minds work. You know, the Rebbe Rashab is loy b'shuften askinan. You know the expression. He's not talking about people that have distortions or other things going on. He's talking about the healthy process of either you know or you don't know. Like, let's say you would say to me, I'm not clear about what's being explained here. So I know, and I'm assuming, and I believe that you are open to hearing. And even though right now it's not resonating, I'll say to you, okay, continue studying it, review it, and ask me questions, and I'll try to explain it further. And I know you don't have any other agenda, so my feeling is you're going to come to that conclusion. Now, you may come back and say, you know what? I have a different way of learning it. Fine, so maybe I need more clarity. The problem is today, getting into the sociological and psychological thing, there are people who are invested in their positions and has nothing to do with seichel altogether. You know, they're just people who, for example, told me there's no God. They know there's no God. I'm not an agnostic, I'm an atheist. So I said, you're sure? You're certain? You could say you're not sure. And therefore, since you're not sure, so meanwhile, you've come to the conclusion there's no God until proven otherwise. But there are people who just convince themselves of things that I think has nothing to do with seichel. It could be conditioning, social conditioning. It could be bad experiences. I mean, you know how many anti-religious people I've met in my life? And when I say to them, maybe you're anti the experience of your religion, they say, yeah, you know what? I don't have anything else to turn to. So even when you're speaking to intelligent people, we all have biases and prejudices. I can't really analyze every reason people are blocked from certain truths. And I'm not trying to be arrogant and say, hey, I know the truth and you don't. Let's explore it together. But I know people that with all the exploration, they're not really looking for the truth. They're looking for a preconceived conclusion, and they're just trying to prove it or trying to use seichel to justify their position. So what you're addressing is not really just the pure intellectual process. Here's, let's say, a truth. You know, I'll give you an example. I'm sure that you can talk to people and you'll tell them, I love learning Ayin Beis. And they'll say to you, how do you know Ayin Beis is true? How does he know what's going on lifting out Tzimtzum? Or that there's spheres. Do you ever see a sphere? They'll say you have no empirical proof for any of this. And you'll hit a wall. Whatever you say to them is not going to help. Whatever the reason is. I'm not judging them. But I don't think it's purely an exploration of truth. Like, you know, you would say to that person, why don't you sit down and learn it? Let's learn it together. No, I'm not going to learn this mumbo jumbo about mystical ideas. So it's my point is there are many blocks and very hard for me to analyze every one of them. This is the work I do. I mean, what I would say is I try my best to say things that are resonating. I always will never I definitely never dogmatic and never imposing. I will say, let me present the case for something, take it or leave it, or look at it. And I try to do it in a pleasant and kind way. The hope is that if you don't have agendas of your own, people will listen to some extent and will resonate, and some people won't. And I will not say that if I didn't reach someone, you know, that sometimes it may be something I didn't express correctly. Maybe I didn't convey it. Maybe I need myself further clarity. I mean, my point is, I don't think this should be measured by how many people you've persuaded or changed their minds. I think our job is to share these teachings, these beautiful concepts here. I can explain everything we learned here without anyone having to accept any axioms like the Torah is truth. Let's talk about any intellectual process. How do you get to truth? So that's how I would, for example, present it. How do you get to, when there's confusion, how do you get to clarity? Now look, even the legal system, you know, you're an attorney. What do? I'm not being now cynical about all the downsides, but essentially a good court of law, its goal is finding clarity. You have to have witnesses, evidence, and then you have counter evidence, and you have the prosecution, and you have the defense. The real goal is, whether it's a jury or it's a judge or a panel of judges, is to achieve clarity where there was confusion or there was disagreement, people disagreeing or arguing and presenting opposite cases, opposite scenarios. So the process is what we're addressing. Anyway, my point is, there are many reasons that people are blocked. I can't really tell you right now all of them. I think you shouldn't feel, your goal is to try to be as sincere and as caring as possible and trying to share an idea. No different than like I'm sharing with you an idea. Love to hear your thoughts and feedback. And that's the approach I take in general. I don't try to convince people. I don't try to prove anything. You never see me sit down and prove God's existence, because I know once you start proving, someone has approved the other way and you could argue about. I try to present a case for God that resonates, and someone says, you know what? I don't necessarily need $1,000 million proof. I also don't have proof that I have love in my heart. How do I know that for sure? I feel it, you know. My point is, you try to create more of a resonating truth, like playing music. I'm not going to prove to you that music is beautiful. Listen to it. And if you like it, great. If you don't like it, we move on, you know.
Yeah, very well said. Extremely well said. And I think you're right about the blockages and impediments being a fundamental factor in answering my question, even though there are so many different types, whatever, sociological, psychological,
and
personal.
And remember, the stereotypes and prejudices that are unknown are much harder to deal with than they're unknown. If you meet someone who's an anti-Semite, they're an anti-Semite. But if someone has a prejudice, they don't even know they have a prejudice. But it's like something ingrained in them that, you know, so when I speak and teach in general, I'm always assuming that the people in the audience have stereotypes and all kinds of preconceived notions. I never take for granted that it's a clean slate. Because I know everybody comes with a history. They have parents, they have schooling, they have culture, society. There's so many subliminal messages that are anti-religious, that are anti-God, and so on, that everyone has been infected by it, including myself. So really, I think a person of truth is trying to be as honest as possible, even with our own subjectivity. I will never say to someone, I'm objective. I'm not objective entirely. I'm not a computer. I'm a human being, grew up in a certain home, certain culture and society. I try to be honest and say I can challenge my own culture and my own community and my own standards that I grew up with. But am I completely objective as an outsider, as if I never was affected? No, when I was a child, I was taught from the youngest age to say brachas, blessings, to wash my hands, to daven, 3 times a day. I mean, this is my culture. Now, I happen to be naturally a skeptic, so I always questioned, but I still was affected, and a lot of it was beautiful. I didn't have really bad experience. It's not like you could also have subjective the other way around, having real, being abused, being molested by a rabbi, by a teacher, God forbid. So, I think honesty is not saying I'm the most objective person on earth. Honesty is saying I will try to acknowledge where I'm subjective, and maybe we need another perspective, because at the end of the day, we all have our subjectivities. So I don't think being objective means that you don't have subjective. It means you're honest and saying. The worst thing is saying, no, I'm not subjective. I have nothing. That means you're not even honest about, you should recuse yourself. You should at least say, I'm talking about something that I do have, my heart is there. I have a warm place in my heart. I'm going to talk about my family. There's no way I'm totally objective. I love my family. I grew up with them. I'm part of them. They're part of me. It's just the nature of, I think it's the awareness. Bittul means acknowledging that element. That's why it's important that one recuse him. Moshe Rabbeinu recused himself from certain situations because he felt he was subjective. It was his brother or his sister or whatever it may be. Anyway, a lot more to say on this search for truth, but just know that Ayin Beis, he's not assuming that we're talking about someone that has other blocks. Here, he's talking about the natural process of going from non-clarity to clarity, just like we grow older and we learn things. A lot of things I'm sure everybody here can acknowledge. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I may have doubted it or may not have been clear to me. And today it's very clear. It's like clear as the day. that that's the truth. And it comes through experience, through learning things, sometimes it comes through trial and error, sometimes it comes actually through making mistakes, where you followed one path and then you realize, hey, you know what? The path I thought was right is not. And I come back and I realize my father or my mother was smarter than I thought they were,
Yeah.
What do they say?
So beautiful.
Yeah. What do they say? They say that I'm too young to know and I'm too old to find out. Which of course is not exactly a good place to be. You want to always be inquisitive and curious and open. Yeah.
Those were amazingly wise words, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the
Okay,
next
so
few
let me
lines,
stop the recording here. One second. So we're middle of page 30.